If you want to get your alternate picking chops faster than a cheetah on a speedboat, it's going to take patience, organization, and strategery. Lucky for you, you're about to learn Uncle Ben's half hour of alternate picking power. Well, hello there, internet land. It's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. The question that I get asked the most here on my YouTube channel is, what is the secret of my hair care regimen? But the second most asked question that I get is how somebody can improve their alternate picking speed and what they need to be practicing on the daily to make it happen. So in order to answer that question, a couple of years ago I put together a half-hour-long practice routine centered on alternate picking. That's a set of different exercises in increasing difficulty in order to help my students start to build up speed in a way that felt natural and organic rather than forced and brutal. And I calls it the half hour of alternate picking power. And that's what we're here to talk about today. You guys can find tabs for all of these exercises over on my Instagram page at Ben Eller Guitars, or you can just search for hashtag half hour of alternate picking power on Instagram and you'll find it. Downloadable tabs, backing tracks, bonus lessons, and much more are available to everybody who supports my channel over on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. There's a multitude of different ways that you can attack the half hour of alternate picking power. The ways I'm going to show you in this video are mainly centered around fairly, mundane sort of chromatic exercises here in the left hand. That way you can really focus on the task at hand, which is improving your alternate picking chops. But after you've got that down, I recommend trying to practice this same routine only in a more musical context by combining it with some scale patterns and stuff. Over on my Patreon page, I'm also uploading a bonus lesson showing you guys how you can take all 6 of the exercises in the half hour of power and apply them to more scalar ideas. That way you get a good musical benefit out of it as well as the physical workout. That's available to everybody who supports me on Patreon, even at the $1 a month level. So be sure to click the link to my Patreon page in the video description and check out that page today. Thanks. Okay, before we get started with the first exercise today, I want to take a second to explain to you guys the logic of why I put this together the way that I did. Or if you just want to trust me on blind faith alone, you can go to the timestamp down here at the bottom of the video to tell you right when all the exercises start. So this exercise program is 6 different exercises that you're going to play to a timer for 5 minutes each, and then move on to the next segment of the program. Why 5 minutes? Well, there's been numerous scientific studies done by people in lab coats with fancy names like Robert and Douglas and stuff like that have shown that whenever you're trying to improve your physical muscle memory and learn new physical tasks and stuff like that, 5 minutes tends to be about the sweet spot for your brain to absorb new information and start forming solid muscle memory. Whenever you do these short intervals of training rather than long marathons, it really allows your brain to take that information and think about it as swallowing it and digesting it. So now that you understand the 5-minute thing, let me explain the difficulty curve and how this increases and how it's going to really benefit your alternate picking. So one of the first principles you have to understand about what makes alternate picking difficult is that alternate picking itself, simply going down, up, repeat on a single string, isn't really all that hard. It's the string changing that makes things difficult. So with that in mind, this exercise program is set up so that the first couple exercises have you playing a lot of notes per string. That way you can really just focus on the picking. The middle section has less notes, and then the final section of the workout features just 2 notes per string. So you're increasing difficulty as you go through this because there's just less notes per string. You can do all of these exercises with a metronome or not. I know a lot of amazing players that just never spend time practicing with a click. Rusty Cooley, Guthrie Govan, tons of players out there have made it known that they never really slaved away in front of a metronome to build their speed. Myself, whenever I go through these, I'll kind of do a little bit of both most of the time. Sometimes it's good for me to start with a metronome to make sure I'm getting really, dialed into the groove. So sometimes when I practice this stuff, I'll just kind of try it at all different speeds in every exercise during that 5-minute period. To make sure that my playing is consistent no matter how fast or slow I'm going. The first thing that you want to focus on when you're trying to become a fast player is to become a clean player, okay? You cannot play fast and not play clean. That becomes a train wreck, and I see a lot of times people just try to get more clicks out of the metronome when their hands aren't really keeping up with them. Again, your number one priority here is to gain control and cleanliness in your playing. After you develop that degree of control, the speed will follow naturally. Don't try to put speed above precision. So without further ado, here's exercise number 1. 6s starting with a downstroke. So the first exercise that I did there is really simple. All I did was to play 1, 2, 3 twice in a row. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It gives you a total of 6 notes. Again, starting with a downstroke, that means it's going to terminate on an upstroke. Down, up, down, up, down, up. Go to the next string, play the same thing. Down, up, down, up, down, up. And so on. Now when I reach the high E, and I've played those 6 notes, what I like to do is then shift up a fret position and start the same exercise but descending. So fingering wise, I'm going to be going 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. What you want to be sure that you do is you phrase it as 6s always. So if you've just done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, come up a fret and start over, you know? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and descend down through the rest of the strings. But after you start getting comfortable with it, I recommend this kind of tongue twister for the left hand in order to make it a little bit more interesting and challenging and build up some more dexterity over here. Check this out. Instead of 1, 2, 3, and then the same thing again, 1, 2, 3, try this fingering combination. Try 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, okay? 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. That's still a total of 6 notes. Then you'd scoot up a fret, and on the way down it's going to be 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 3, 2, 1. That one sucks. Whichever fingering combination you do, just be sure to alternate pick it beginning with a downstroke. If you ever start a string on an upstroke, you've messed up. You know, again, this is all about alternate picking. You should always be starting each string on a down, ending each string on an up whenever you're doing these 6-note exercises. So after you've done that for 5 minutes, reset that timer and let's get into phase number 2 of this. 6s, but starting with an upstroke. Okay, all the same rules as phase number 1 apply. You can do any different fingering combination that you want to. Just make sure that you do it all as 6s beginning with an upstroke. The reason why I'm having you do it this way is because whenever you play 6 notes starting on an up, it's always going to terminate or change strings on a downstroke. Up, down, up, down, up, down. Up, down, up, down, up, down. See, the physicality of changing strings after a downstroke is completely different than the movements that you made when you were changing strings after an upstroke. It's just a very different set of muscle movements that you have to make. If you're practicing these exercises while using your metronome like I was right there, something I want you to focus on is really nailing the first note of each of those little groupings, you know? You're playing 2 groupings of 3, right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 to make that group of 6. What I want you to really focus on is nailing that note that lands on the downbeat. This is that chunking concept that I picked up from Troy Grady in his Cracking the Code series that I applied to all of my fast playing. I'm not concentrating on all 6 of those notes. Whenever I play those fast 6s, and it's like this, all I'm really feeling is the note that lands on the downbeat. The other ones, I'm not even thinking about. I'm just thinking, get your finger down, your first finger in this case, on the downbeat every time, no matter where I am or what string I'm on. The other notes will fill in the blanks themselves and land exactly where they should, as long as this guy is a human metronome, you know? Descending, it would be this finger in that case. Again, I'm really just concentrating on putting that finger on the downbeat, and that's it. Everything else will line up. In the Patreon only half hour of power video though, I'm going to show you guys how I like to practice the 6s by combining them with some of my favorite scale patterns and stuff to make it a lot more applicable and musical. I figure if you can get 2 birds stoned at once and work on your alternate picking while also using some, you know, licks and things that you might actually sneak into a solo, well, that's twice the fun. So be sure to check out that Patreon only video. So now you're already done with 1/3 of your workout here. You've done exercise number 1, which is 5 minutes of 6s starting with a downstroke. You've done exercise number 2, which is 5 minutes of 6s starting with an upstroke. And now you're ready to move on to exercise number 3, 4s starting with a downstroke. This this is a pretty standard exercise that I'm pretty sure everybody does at some point in their life. And again, as you play up this, I want you just to focus on getting all those notes super clean and crisp. Don't worry about the speed, worry about the control. And just like the last set of exercises, after we reach the high E string, we're going to scoot up a fret and start our descent. Now, one thing I want you guys to be doing with all of these exercises, not just this one, even the previous ones and the ones beyond this too, are to randomize your patterns. Whenever I practice these exercises, I try to sneak up on my brain, so to speak, and play tricks on it and see if it can change directions on a dime, you know? I might do that by choosing to ascend on a different string rather than just the E strings every time, you know? I might stop halfway through, ascend on the G, work my way down, move up, maybe this time I ascend on the B. It sounds something like this. I'll do the G ascent here. I think the G ascent is going to be my rap album. Moving up on the E. Maybe I'll go up on the D, like your mom. Maybe I'll even start getting up here on the strings and just work only the top 3 strings. So I'll go up on the E, G, E. Maybe I'll start changing directions, going down instead of up. Which Buckethead solo is that? By randomizing your patterns, you're going to build up the skills that you're going to need while you're improvising to change directions on a dime and go from any string to any string, any set of changes that you're doing, and just become a lot more nimble mentally and physically. Now, because for a lot of you guys, those 4s are probably set in stone by now, and I bet a lot of you guys can do that without thinking about it, do try to mix up those fingering patterns. How many other ways can you play 4 notes on a string, right? You might want to change up your fingering combinations to something like this. Maybe it's 1, 3, 2, 4 on every string, right? That's still 4 notes. 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, and so on. On the way down, that'd be 4, 2, 3, 1. So be sure to change up those fingering combinations and randomize where you ascend and descend through the strings. 5 minutes of that before we move on to module number 4. 4s, starting with an upstroke. Again, this is going to feature string changes happening after those downstrokes, which are just as important as your upstroke changes. That's why this entire program is kind of half divided into downstroke change stuff and half divided into upstroke changes. Now, a lot of my students have a hard time playing exercises like this starting with an upstroke. It just kind of tends to feel like you just got on a bicycle and you put, your alternate foot on the pedal first. Everything just kind of feels bass-ackwards, and it's hard to say why. But there is something you can do to trick your brain into thinking that you're starting on a downstroke. Scope this out. What I want you guys to listen for is where I place the first note of the exercise, in other words, the first upstroke, in relation to the beat. Check this out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. What I did there is I put that very first upstroke as a pickup note on the upbeat of 4. Okay? So whenever beat number 4 rolled around and I said 3 and 4 and, that's where I put that first note. The first upstroke, in other words. Again, listen closely. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. By putting the first note as a pickup note on the upbeat of 4, that ensures that the first downstroke that I do is on the beat. 3, 4, and 1, So then your downstrokes are still tied to a downbeat, but you've just tricked yourself into starting with an upstroke on an upbeat. This is definitely going to help you strengthen your sense of subdividing within a beat or bar of music, which is something a lot of guitar players struggle with. By not coming in on the obvious downbeat and instead having to land kind of halfway in between beats, it's going to make your sense of rhythm that much better. I've also found some cool ways to practice the 4-note per string stuff using some melodic scale patterns, and that's what we're going to talk about in the Patreon-only version of this video. They're phrased in a cool, kind of neoclassical way and can be a real tongue twister for the fretting hand, so be sure to get into that too. So now you're 20 minutes in and you've done 6s starting on a down, 6s starting on an up, 4s starting on a down, 4s starting on an up, and now we're here to the last 2 phases, the most difficult ones, and that's going to begin with 2 notes per string starting with a downstroke. Okay, so again, we're ramping up that difficulty even more here, because on each string, all you're gonna have time to do is one round, so to speak, of alternate picking, down, up, and then it's time to change strings again. So this is gonna feature a lot of those specialized, string changing strokes that we all need to work on if we want to become alternate picking masters. So in the demo there, I kept things really simple and just played 1, 2, on every string, and then 2, 1 while I'm descending. Just make it, again, super simple, and that way you can focus on the picking hand more. If you're feeling particularly masochistic, I recommend practicing this one. Do 1, 2 on the way up, 4, 3 on the way down. So 1, 2 on the way up, 4, 3 on the way down. Then move up a fret, and so on. That was really great to help you with that phantom finger thing, where it's like if you're not using a particular finger or two, they tend to drift off or mimic the motions of the other ones. This is really great to help you kind of beat that stuff. Because you want to keep all 4 of those fingers close to the board and not let them run away just because they're not being used at that time. Try to keep all 4 fingers close to the board at all times and your fingers spread out in a comfortable manner. Whew. After you're done with those, you're ready to move on to the final phase of this exercise program, which, as you could probably predict by now, is 2 notes per string starting on an upstroke. So this is another one of those exercises where we can start off with that first upstroke happening on an upbeat pickup note. That way our downstroke will fall right where it usually does on the downbeat. So you can imagine 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4 as you practice this exercise. There's a couple of different ways that you can practice the 2 note per string stuff using scales to get that melodic benefit out of it. There's some obvious ones and some not so obvious ones that we'll talk about in the Patreon only version of this video. So you may have noticed that I was practicing that exercise higher up on the neck. And that's something I recommend you do for all of these exercises, not just the 2 note per string. Do all of them all over the neck. Play them down low where the stretches are big. Play them up high where your fingers are kind of bunched together. But there's actually a bigger, deeper benefit that happens to your picking whenever we practice these exercises up high. It's due to something that I've started calling radial disturbance, which is also what I think I'm gonna title my jazz fusion album. See, the fingerboard of your guitar is not dead flat. It follows a slight radius or curvature. Classical guitars are totally flat, but most every other guitar out there has at least some degree of curvature to the fretboard of the guitar. Now back here at the bridge, your saddles are going to be set up ideally to match that, So under here, under your picking hand, the strings aren't like this. They're kind of curved like this in order to suit the way that the neck is radiused. Whenever we fret a note down here low on the neck, that radius that our pick is trying to negotiate isn't really disturbed that much at all. So what you can do to test that is just watch your low E string really closely here and fret the first fret on your guitar. You'll see it barely looks like it's moving at all, right? Now watch what happens to that low E string if you fret maybe up here at fret number 17 or something like that. Look at the difference in the way that that radius is affected. The string is dipping down into the radius much more. When we were on the first fret, it was barely doing this. But the higher up on the neck you go, the more that thing starts getting depressed. So you gotta think, if you're playing on one of the middle strings of the guitar, it's suddenly in here, much deeper in the radius. Whereas if you're playing down here on the first position, it's barely doing anything at all. So by practicing these exercises in areas of the neck where that radius is gonna be disturbed, you're teaching your pick how to follow that string no matter how deep into the curvature it is. So on all 6 of these exercises, I want you guys to randomize the fingering patterns. I want you guys to randomize where you ascend and descend on the strings. And I want you guys to play them all over the neck of the guitar. That way your picking hand here gets used to, smartly navigating that tricky, ever-changing radius of where strings are sitting relative to where we're fretting. So now you guys have an entire outline of the half hour of alternate picking power that I designed to build maximum speed and chops in no time. You're gonna do 5 minutes each of 6s starting with a downstroke, 6s starting with an up, 4s starting with a downstroke, 4s starting with an up, 2 starting with a downstroke, and finishing off with 2s starting with an up. That's gonna give you a little bit of everything that you need and nothing that you don't. And I guarantee if you practice that thing, every day, even for a week or so, you're gonna start to see and feel some real results and some real agility and power and precision building up in that picking hand. I'd like to ask you guys to try it out for a week or two and then come back with a comment letting me know how it's treated you. It's something that I did consistently for a long time, and it made a big difference in my playing. And it seems like every student that I tell this practice routine to really gets a lot out of it. It's also a great thing to run through anytime you know you got like a big day in the studio that you're going to be tracking some hot stuff with. Maybe you got a big show and you got a little bit of time backstage to warm up. This is the perfect thing because of the way it gradually ascends in difficulty, starting with things that aren't too bad and working your way towards the more difficult stuff. By the time you get done with it, your right hand is going to feel super relaxed and in control, and you're gonna kick some ass. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for new content coming at you every single week. Be sure to ring the bell for notifications every time I upload a new slice of fried gold. And like I said earlier, if you like this video and want to help support my channel, be sure to visit that Patreon page over at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. I'm always uploading special Patreon-only lessons over there, and this week you're going to get a super special bonus lesson showing you guys how you can practice the half hour of power in a melodic and musical fashion using some scale patterns and stuff. So check out that Patreon page, start reaping the benefits today. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been fun as always, but it's about time to go to bed. It's past 3:30 in the morning now, and here I am wide awake because I'm just thrilled to make you guys all better pickers. But yeah, I gotta hit the hay. But as for you guys, you got a half hour of work to do to start increasing your alternate picking speed today. So I recommend you grab your guitar, get away from the computer, and get to work. Less clicking, more picking.